Seated by the kitchen, I observed my son's wedding through a swinging door, separated from the celebration by a tray of shrimp cocktail. I had financed the entire event, from every single flower to each individual chair. However, when the music began and the toasts were underway, I was not a part of it, not in the least. I maintained a quiet smile throughout the evening, and after the last piece of cake was eaten, I brought everything to a halt with a single phone call. If this story finds you, please subscribe and let me know where in the world you are watching from. My assigned place had no sign, no card, no nameplate, and no welcoming gesture. Just a folding chair with a paper napkin carelessly thrown over the seat. That was my spot, nestled between a stack of used trays and a wheeled cart whose broken wheel squeaked with every push. For a few moments I stood there blinking hard. The air was thick with the sour scent of marinara, which clung to the steam billowing from the kitchen doors. I could feel the heat from the ovens on my back and a knot formed deep inside me. I looked down at my dress, a soft mauve chiffon that had been hand-stitched. I had spent 3 hours getting my hair styled that morning, 3 hours pretending this day would be as significant for me as it was for them. Yet no one had bothered to inform me. No one said, "We've made different seating arrangements." No one even looked at me when I arrived, not even Adam. He was too consumed with smiling broadly, adjusting his cufflinks, and letting her mother kiss him on the cheek as if she were the one who had raised him. It was as if she were the one who had stayed up every night when he was plagued by night terrors. As if she were the one who had taken on double shifts to afford his braces, a choice that meant I couldn't afford both rent and the sight of his straight smile. I clutched my small beige leather handbag, the one he had bought for me years ago on Mother's Day when he still called me Mama. My hands were trembling. I could feel a subtle vibration in my wrists, like an electrical current trying to escape through my fingertips. The catering manager, a young man who couldn't have been more than 18, smiled awkwardly. They said you were supposed to wait back here, ma'am," he said. The bride didn't want, any visual clashes with the theme. I stared at him. Theme. He flinched, glancing toward the swinging doors. The silver edge of the door struck the wall again with a sharp clang. Laughter spilled in from the reception hall, followed by a burst of music. "Like for aesthetic consistency with the photos and everything," he added. I slowly sat down. The chair groaned. There was a dark stain on the floor beneath my feet, perhaps gravy. My shoes stuck slightly when I tried to move them. I looked at my freshly manicured nails, painted a soft pink, and then at the cold chicken breast someone had dropped in front of me on a chipped white plate. The most painful part was my silence. I didn't utter a single word. I had told myself, it's his day, don't ruin this for him. Don't be that mother. Because I had paid for everything and still clung to the belief that it meant something. I pulled out the program I had been given at the church. It was elegant, with cursive script on cream-colored cardstock. There was no mention of me anywhere. Her father had walked her down the aisle. Her mother had given the first speech. I was merely the source of funds, a ghost in the kitchen, the woman no one wanted in the picture. The door swung open again. I caught a fleeting glimpse of the chandelier, the band beginning to play, and the first dance, Adam and Sophia twirling beneath a soft golden light. He never once looked my way. I pressed my napkin to my mouth, pretending to dab at a non-existent stain. My eyes burned. I told myself it was the onions from the kitchen, the steam, the heat, not the feeling of betrayal. But it was. And somewhere deep inside me, something quietly fractured like a hairline crack in a sheet of glass, the kind you don't notice until the entire thing shatters. I stared at the wall in front of me, at a patch of peeling paint behind a fire extinguisher. I stared so intensely I felt I might burn a hole through it. That spot became my anchor, my focus, the only thing preventing me from falling apart in front of a waiter carrying crab puffs. Because if I let the tears out, if I started to cry, I didn't know if I would ever be able to stop. I took a deep breath and then another. The chicken on my plate had grown cold. I did not touch it. Eventually someone brought out dessert. I didn't taste it, only stared at the layers of white and gold, her colors, her flawless little vision. And then I made the call. It was brief and to the point. There was no need for explanation. Just 3 simple cancellations. The flowers for the next day's brunch, the second half of the band's payment, and the open bar that was scheduled to last until midnight. My voice remained steady, calm, and composed. When I hung up, I felt no guilt. I felt no regret. I felt the first spark of something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. I looked at my hands again. They were no longer shaking. My heart was no longer racing, just a quiet hum like an engine coming back to life. The door swung once more. Another flash of light, of laughter, of the life from which I had been excluded. Let them toast without me. I now had my own plans. I did not get a moment of sleep that night. I lay in the stiff hotel bed, still in my dress, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun above me, as if it might suddenly unscrew and crash onto my chest. I half hoped that it would. I could still smell the kitchen grease in my hair, the scent of expensive roses mixed with the sour smell of my own sweat. Humiliation clung to my skin like a second layer. At some point I kicked off my shoes. My feet were swollen. They had ached throughout the entire reception, but I hadn't dared take them off. I needed to look presentable even in the kitchen. It was around 2 a.m. when I sat up. The digital clock glowed red. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. I did not check it. I already knew what was there. 7 missed calls from Adam, a text from my niece that simply read, "What happened? Everyone's freaking out." I opened the wedding budget spreadsheet on my tablet. I had been keeping it meticulously for more than a year. She recognized every fragrance, every detail, every little update, every extravagant request Sophia ever made, all accompanied by a tight smile. And then there was that particular word she used, a term like a blade concealed within silk. Elevated. "Eleanor," she would say, "we just want something a little more elevated." That single word was the reason she consented to the hand-calligraphed invitations from a tiny vendor on Etsy located in Vermont. That was why the venue shifted from the local church hall to a refurbished barn adorned with chandeliers and vintage whiskey barrels. It was the reason the open bar was upgraded with a custom cocktail menu, and the wedding cake grew from 2 layers to a towering stack of 5. She covered all the expenses. Not a single person offered to help with the costs. Neither Adam nor Sophia's parents ever made the offer. And Eleanor never brought it up. She wanted her son to have every possible thing that she couldn't afford to give him when she was raising him on her own. She reviewed the recent transactions and her breath caught in her throat. 2 unauthorized charges appeared from just a couple of days before the wedding. One was a bar tab from a tasting event. The second was an upgrade for the dress rehearsal dinner. It was the exact same restaurant where they had seated her in the back, right next to the kitchen once again. Her stomach tightened. She checked the credit card information again. It was her card, used without her consent. And then she spotted the note Sophia had left on a Venmo transaction to one of her bridesmaids. "His mom is covering everything. Might as well go big." Wedding vibes. She didn't cry. Not this time. He felt absolutely nothing. It was that peculiar heavy emptiness that arrives after an overwhelming amount of pain. It felt as if her insides had gone completely numb, as if her nerve endings had recoiled inward for self-protection. Reaching over, she switched on the lamp. The sudden light was harsh against her eyes. She moved to the mirror above the dresser, and her own reflection startled her. There was smudged mascara beneath her eyes. The soft lines of her mouth had hardened into an unfamiliar expression. Her hair was flat, one side flattened from the pillow. She looked like someone who had aged by a full decade in a single night. But then a change occurred. She smoothed her hair back, washed her face and sat down at the desk, opening her email application. She composed 3 separate messages. One was for the florist. "Please cancel the Sunday delivery. The payment balance is being withheld. Thank you." The second was to the band. "Due to modifications in the event schedule, we will no longer require the second performance. Please consider the matter concluded." The final message went to the bar vendor. "We are reducing the post-reception services. Kindly cancel the second shift and do not process the remaining balance." Every message was polite, professional, and ultimately final. It was almost dawn when she hit send, and as the sky outside transitioned from black to a bruised blue, she closed her tablet, sat on the bed, and listened to the quiet hum of the air conditioning. For the first time in many months she felt like herself again. She wasn't furious, not yet. But she was finished. Finished being convenient. Finished being the source of money. Finished being an afterthought. Let them figure it out. Let them scramble to find solutions. Let them remember the instant the music stopped playing, the moment the bar ceased pouring drinks, and the fact that the flowers never showed up, and then let them wonder why. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would recall who made the entire wedding possible in the first place. The woman in the kitchen, the one they didn't want in any of the photos. The music pulsed through the wall like a distant, rhythmic heartbeat. She sat in the folding chair, a plate of cold hors d'oeuvres and a Diet Coke from the catering cooler resting beside her, and tried not to listen, but she couldn't help herself. Each laugh, every cheer, the clinking of every glass, it all found its way back to her through the swinging door, a cruel reminder of her exclusion. She could hear a man giving a toast, probably Sophia's father or perhaps Adam's best man. She leaned back just a bit, enough to catch a glimpse through the small gap in the door. There they were, arranged in front of the ridiculous floral arch she had paid William for. Gold chairs, floating candles, and a custom neon sign that read, "The future is forever," in looping cursive. She recognized the voices even when she couldn't see the faces. Sophia's mother, Gillian, spoke in her trademark tone of false sympathy. "Oh my goodness, Adam, you are just the sweetest man alive. Sophia is so lucky." Laughter and cheering followed. She froze. There at the main table sat Gillian, draped in navy chiffon and adorned with pearls as if she were born into wealth, which she most certainly was not. She had met Eleanor only 3 times before the wedding. Gillian had never inquired about Eleanor's life, never expressed gratitude for the payments, and had not even offered to contribute 1 penny. Beside her, Sophia's father was holding court like a suburban monarch with a large, booming laugh. This was the same man who had told her at the rehearsal dinner, "We truly admire your perseverance. Raising Adam on your own must have been so difficult." Perseverance. As if she had simply climbed a mountain, rather than working for years in medical scrubs so her child wouldn't have to live with second-hand items. And there was Adam. Her Adam, smiling like a total stranger, positioned between her parents as if he had always belonged to them. She searched for her own family. Her sister Laura sat 2 rows back next to her cousin Beth. Neither of them looked toward the kitchen. No one did. She was not a part of the show. She was an issue that had been resolved by a chair in the back and a door that swung shut. A young woman, a waiter who was likely a college student, brushed past her. She glanced at Eleanor's plate and offered an awkward, guilty smile. "Do you want, a refill or anything?" Eleanor shook her head. "I'm fine," she replied, but she was not. Every single part of her ached. Her feet, her shoulders, her jaw was so tightly clenched that it pulsed behind her eyes. Her heart felt heavy in her chest, like a rotten lump that refused to move. She stared at the plate. There were 3 olives, a single slice of brie, and a sad-looking triangle of toast. She had not eaten since breakfast, but she could not bring herself to put anything into her mouth. Her stomach was a clenched fist and her throat was a narrow pipe. She thought of the seating chart. She had gently asked Sophia weeks ago, "Have you figured out where I will be sitting?" Sophia had given her a tight, bright smile. "We're still finalizing everything. Don't worry, Eleanor. You will be included." Eleanor should have known better. He did know. Somewhere deep down she was aware that she was being managed, moved around like a prop. She was invited for her checkbook, tolerated for appearances, but never truly desired. The most difficult part was that she had agreed to everything. She allowed them to chip away at her role, one tiny compromise at a time. No speech from her, no mother-son dance because they said it would feel awkward. No photos before the ceremony, no mention in the program, just a seat in the kitchen. She heard Adam's laugh again. That deep, rumbling laugh he used to have as a kid when she would chase him through the sprinkler in their yard. It was the same laugh she hadn't heard him direct at her in a few years. She felt something rise in her chest. It was not grief, not disappointment, but rage. A quiet, controlled, and devastating rage. Moving to the kitchen's swinging door, I put my hand on the edge and gave it a slight push, just enough to glimpse through once more. My gaze met Sophia's. She saw me. A confident, calm smile, not one of regret or nerves, spread across her face. She knew exactly where I was and what she had done, and she looked at me as if this was the way things were supposed to be, as if I were in my rightful place. She then turned to her bridesmaids, tilted her head back and let out a laugh. At that moment I knew this wasn't an accident. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. This was a plan, a choice. She didn't want me here and Adam had let her. They both had. And something within me shifted. It didn't shatter this time, it just realigned. My role in their lives had been redefined and I was finished pretending not to notice. Let them have their moment in the spotlight. Let them drink their celebratory beverages. They believed I was invisible, but they had no idea what I was capable of taking away from them. The toasts began while I remained by the kitchen entrance. The lights in the reception hall had been dimmed, and I could see the soft twinkle of fairy lights above, along with the golden gleam from the charger plates on every table. A single squeal from the microphone, and then her father's voice as booming as a game show host filled the space. To our daughter Sophia and her perfect new husband Adam. A chorus of cheers erupted. I took a step backward into the organized chaos of the kitchen. Metal trays clanged, voices rose, and a server argued about the gluten-free meal for table number 12. I moved to the side, leaning against the cold plaster wall. The aroma of garlic and hot oil hung in the air. From the other side of the door, her father continued his speech. When Sophia was a little girl, she told us she wanted a fairy tale, a prince, a castle, and a happily ever after. Well, sweetheart, today you got it. More applause followed and my breath caught. Her father was never there when Adam was a little boy. He never saw me cleaning vomit off the bathroom floor in the early morning. He never watched me mend the buttons back onto his school uniform. He never drove for miles on treacherous, icy roads to take him to a chess tournament. But on this day they were rewriting the story and I had been erased from it. I looked down at my hands once more. My fingers were splotchy and trembling slightly, the skin thin. A cold draft from the air vent above made my arms tingle. Then came Sophia's mother's turn. Her voice was syrupy and clearly practiced. We are so thankful to be joined today by so many people who love Sophia and Adam, and to welcome Adam into our family. He's like a second son to us already. Another cheer. A second son. There wasn't a single word about me, not a word about the woman who raised him. There was no, "Thank you for everything, Eleanor." No, "We appreciate your generosity." No, "This day would not be possible without her." Nothing. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard that I tasted blood. My feet ached, but I would not sit down. Then came the part one had been anticipating with dread, the groom's speech. Adam stepped up to the microphone. He looked radiant, with a strong jaw and a confident posture, in a perfectly fitted suit that I had helped pay for. I had witnessed him take his first breath in a neonatal intensive care unit, and now he stood there, radiant and shining, a stranger. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered, polished as if he had rehearsed it in a mirror. "I feel so fortunate. Sophia, you have made me the happiest man alive. And to your family, thank you for welcoming me as one of your own. I truly feel at home with all of you." My throat constricted. "And to everyone who helped make this day happen, thank you. This has been the most incredible day of our lives." My name was never spoken, not even once. I had paid for the venue, the catering, the photographer, the DJ, the linens, and the custom neon sign. I had even paid for the gown Sophia wore as she stood with her hand on his arm. And yet it was as if I didn't exist. The servers applauded. I didn't move. The band began to play again. The dance floor started to fill. Someone brought me a slice of cake on a plastic plate. I stared at it, vanilla with raspberry filling, her favorite. I do not care for raspberry, I never have. I looked at the thin gold fork they gave me. My hand was steady now. I remembered when Adam turned a decade old and asked for chocolate cake with sprinkles. I worked 2 extra shifts just to buy the specific one he had pointed to in the bakery window. His eyes lit up when he saw it and he hugged me so tightly that day. That little boy was gone. In his place was a man who didn't even remember to save a seat for me. I set the cake aside. I waited until the final bite of dessert was served, until people were standing up, loosening their ties and wiping icing from their mouths, until the music reached its perfect crescendo. Then I walked out of the kitchen, past the servers, past the bar, and out the side door. The air outside was cool and still, with the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I took out my phone. There were 3 calls. One to the florist, one to the band, and one to the bar manager. My words were polite and direct, with no need for explanations. By the time I walked back into the hotel, the plans were already in motion. The next day's brunch was cancelled, the late-night music set was pulled, and the second bartender along with the cocktail menu were gone. I had stayed silent for long enough. Now let them enjoy what is left. To make them feel the void, the emptiness. To force them to ask questions. It made no difference to me if they considered me over-the-top, small-minded, or ungrateful. They had already written me out of the narrative. All I had done was turn the page. The hotel room smelled of rose hand cream and a faint, metallic scent. Perhaps it was the stress, perhaps it was my own skin. I sat on the bed with my legs crossed. The bedspread was still immaculate underneath me, just as it had been when I checked in 2 nights ago. I hadn't shed a single tear. Yet something within me had grown cold. Not frozen, because things that are frozen are fragile and breakable. I was solidifying, being hardened. The sun had not yet risen. I reached into my bag and took out my cell phone. 6 missed calls, 2 voicemails, and more than a dozen messages. Adam, where are you? Why is brunch cancelled? Mom, seriously, this is not a joke. Sophia, I don't understand what is happening. Are you okay? Please respond. This is so childish. I let out a soft laugh, just a quiet exhalation through my nose. Childish, I repeated to myself. I opened the bank application again. My fingers moved with the practiced ease of someone who had balanced a checkbook every Sunday for 3 decades. The charges were still there, unauthorized and brazen. My new daughter-in-law, the bride, had taken the liberty of using my card for a pre-wedding bar hop and a spa day with her bridal party. The itemized receipts showed it all. Bottles of bubbly, professional nail care, face masks, and brunch for 8 people. No one had consulted me. Not a single person had even informed me. The trust that had been in my heart like an old quilt, warm and familiar, now felt shredded, as if someone had deliberately cut it while I was sleeping. I navigated to my email inbox. There were 2 new messages. One was from the florist. We are disappointed by the sudden cancellation, but we understand. Per our agreement, there are no refunds for such short notice. Fine, I thought. The second email came from the band's manager. We were halfway through our setup when the cancellation came in. It's extremely unusual, but your message was clear. We'll leave the deposit untouched. This was also fine. I was not doing this for a refund. I was doing this for myself. For the unseen woman in the kitchen chair. For the mother who was excluded from her own son's momentous occasion. My stomach grumbled. I hadn't eaten since the previous day. The very thought of food made me feel sick. Instead, I stood up, pulled open the heavy curtains, and watched the sun bleed into the sky. A burst of orange, then soft pink, and finally a pale yellow that made everything appear surreal. And then I remembered something. A small, red folder tucked away in the drawer of my dresser back at home. Inside were old documents, legal papers, and letters I had never thrown away. I felt drawn to it, as if it had been whispering to me the entire time. I slowly gathered my things, took a shower to wash away the perfume and the resentment, dried my hair, and put on a pair of jeans and a button-down shirt that still carried the faint scent of lavender laundry soap. I checked out of the hotel without a word. The drive home was silent, with only the sound of my car's tires on the pavement and the soft static of the radio playing songs I did not recognize. It was the kind of drive where you begin to hear your own thoughts, loud and unfiltered. He did not even mention you. They all saw where you were sitting. Not a single person did anything. When I pulled into my driveway, the roses I had planted 2 summers earlier were in full bloom. I did not stop to admire them. I went straight to my room, opened the dresser, retrieved the red folder, and sat on the bed. At the bottom of the stack, beneath old insurance documents and a few photographs I had not looked at in years, was a letter. The envelope had yellowed corners and was postmarked from Arizona, with a date written in my late husband's handwriting from the year he left. I remembered finding it weeks after he had passed away. I couldn't bring myself to open it back then. It felt like rubbing salt in an open wound, like letting him speak from beyond the grave when I wasn't prepared to listen. But now I slid my finger under the flap. The paper was thin, his handwriting slanted and familiar. It began simply, "Eleanor, I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something." My heart rate sped up. My hands trembled slightly. "I've been keeping a secret and I can't take it to my grave. You deserve the truth. Adam, he is not biologically yours. I found out years ago that Sophia was pregnant when we first got together. I thought I could pretend he was mine, but he is not. And neither of us ever told you." I stopped reading. The room spun for a brief moment, then settled. I continued to read the rest. Apologies, justifications, regrets. Words that were meaningless now. Adam, my Adam, was the result of an affair. Another woman's child left on my doorstep like a test I didn't know I was taking. And I passed. God help me. I passed. Every scraped knee, every story at bedtime, every extra shift I worked to buy him new sneakers and school photos. I passed with flying colors. And yet here I was, cast aside, replaced and erased. But now I had a new sense of clarity, a truth sharp enough to cut through years of silence. And I was done bleeding. I did not weep. Even as I sat there with that letter trembling in my lap, its weight heavier than anything I had ever held, I did not shed a single tear. What would be the point? Tears had built Adam's childhood. Tears paid for his shoes, his asthma medication, his first automobile. Those tears had soaked my pillow after his father left, and again when he walked across the high school stage, not once turning to acknowledge me in the crowd. My tear ducts had been empty for years. What I possessed now was something different. It was not sorrow, nor was it heartbreak. It was clarity. I went to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee. It was black and strong. I sat by the window and watched my neighbor's sprinkler tick, tick, tick across the grass. It was a perfectly ordinary Sunday morning, but I was no longer the woman who had paid for someone else's fairy tale only to be given a folding chair behind the punch bowl in return. I was no longer the woman who would simply accept this. Not this time. I picked up my phone and began with the florist. My voice was calm and courteous. I expressed gratitude for their understanding and confirmed once more that the arrangements for Sunday were not required. I offered no explanation. I did not feel I owed them one. The band was next. The same tone, the same purposeful silence about the reason. Then the bar service. Hello, this is Eleanor Vance. Yes, that's correct. I'm calling to cancel the cocktail reception for the post-wedding brunch. Yes. No, there are no issues. Just a change of heart. Thank you. 3 phone calls, 3 cancellations. I could have stopped there, but I knew what was coming. I powered off my phone, then turned it back on 5 minutes later. There were 38 unread messages and 3 voicemails. Adam again. Mom, where are you? The band didn't show up. What the heck is going on? Then Sophia's mother. I don't know what is happening, but this is incredibly unprofessional. People are asking questions. Then Sophia herself. Eleanor, seriously. Is this because you were upset about the seating? It's just petty. We had a vision. Do not ruin this. Petty. The word resonated like a curse, like a hot branding iron. And yet, when I closed my eyes, all I could see was her smirking across the reception hall, knowing exactly where I was, knowing what she had done, knowing I would not fight back, until now. I switched off the phone again. I would let them descend into chaos. I would let the questions accumulate. I would let them discover that the bar was dry because I had been the source. That the music had ceased because I had paid the final bill. That the flowers never arrived because the roots were rotten. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and fed the cat. It was the most peaceful I had felt in several months. Around noon the doorbell rang. I did not answer it. I would let them knock. I would let them endure the heat of their own discomfort. Later that evening I posted a single photograph on a social media platform. Not of the wedding, not of myself. Just a picture of the check I had written. The account number was blurred out, but my signature was clearly visible. There was no caption, no explanation, just that image. It was a receipt of sacrifice. And then I logged off. Not only from the social media site, but from the guilt, from the silence, from the pretense that this was not a betrayal. I did not require their explanations, their version of events, or their justifications. I would let them sit in the wreckage. I was not going to rescue them from it. The silence was the first indication that they were in a panic. No more messages, no more phone calls, just an odd, stretching quiet, like the eye of a storm passing directly over my house. I could sense it, the tension, the waiting. They had no idea what I would do next. I didn't either, but it was going to be my decision. On Monday morning I brewed coffee and sat by the window again. No makeup, no earrings, just me, the new day, and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. Adam had not called since the day before. His last voicemail had been brief, rigid, and defensive. You really caused a scene, Mom. Everyone is talking. You embarrassed us. I don't know what you were trying to prove, but you crossed a line. I did not even flinch when I heard it. Because here is the truth that no one likes to say out loud. You can give a person everything, your time, your money, your affection, and still be seen as expendable. You can build their entire world and still be told you do not fit the aesthetic. The betrayal no longer surprised me. What surprised me was how little I cared now that I had stopped pleading for their approval. That morning I erased his contact from my phone. Just his name. The number remained. I did not need to forget him. I simply did not want his name to light up my screen as if it still belonged there. Around noon, I went out to run a few small errands. The grocery store, the post office. Life continued. And in the bakery aisle of all places I saw my cousin Beth, who had flown in for the wedding. She smiled when she saw me, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Eleanor." "Hey." I gave a nod. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Are you okay?" I met her gaze. "Were you okay?" I asked in return, watching me sit all the way back there. She blushed. I didn't realize that was on purpose. I thought maybe you." "No," I cut in gently. "He did not think. That is all." There was a long silence. "I am sorry," she said finally. "It was wrong. I should have said something." I nodded once. "Thank you." She looked relieved, as if that small moment of taking responsibility had liberated her. It had not liberated me, but it was a beginning. When I got home, I found a bouquet on my porch. It was made of cheap carnations already wilting, and there was no card. I did not bring them inside. Instead, I walked them straight to the trash bin. Later that evening, I checked the social media site. The photo of the check had almost 100 comments. They were from old friends, colleagues, neighbors, people I had not heard from in years. Some were bewildered, some were outraged, but most understood. One comment stood out. "This broke my heart, Eleanor, and I have never related to something so deeply. Thank you for showing us we do not have to stay silent." That was it, the beginning of something new. Not an act of revenge, not spite, but power reclaimed. Let them rage in group chats. Let them create their own story. I was not going to reply. I was not going to explain. I was finally choosing silence, not as a sign of submission, but as a form of control. And this time the silence was mine. The initial discovery wasn't intentional at all. The woman, whose name was Eleanor, was simply trying to clear out the remains of a past life she'd been too exhausted to deal with. Buried between old tax documents and expired coupons, she found it. The familiar red folder, the one she had thought was empty. But tucked inside its sleeve, so slender it was almost a part of the lining, was a second letter. This one had no envelope. It was simply folded once, then folded again, and handwritten. The slanted script was unmistakable, and the name staring back at her was that of her former husband, Mark. The letter was dated 3 days before his death. It began with the words, "Eleanor, if you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. I'm not sure if you opened it. I truly hope you did. I won't spend time apologizing again. I need to tell you something more. It's something I couldn't carry with me. Something I should have said a long time ago." He continued, "Adam wasn't just someone else's son. He was never intended to be yours at all. When Sophia left him at my door, she didn't want to keep him. She was 18 and she was terrified. She asked me to give him up for adoption. I couldn't do it. I simply didn't have the heart. I lied to you. I told you he was ours, that it was a mistake from before we were married. And you believed me. You raised him. You loved him as if he were your own flesh and blood. But the truth is, he wasn't even that. He was the child of a stranger. And you still made him your entire world. I don't know how you'll feel reading this, but I hope with all my heart that you know whatever else I did wrong, I was right about choosing you. You were the only person strong enough to be his mother. Not because of blood ties, but because of the woman you are." The words hit her like a physical weight, settling on her chest like a large stone. He was not hers by biology, not even by accident. He was a child given to her by a man who then left them both, as if handing over a child were a simple favor. Eleanor's breath hitched for the first time in what felt like days. Her legs felt weak. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper still clutched in her hand. A flood of 1,000 memories flashed through her mind. She recalled the first time she rocked Adam to sleep, his tiny fists curled against her shoulder. She remembered his first word, truck, and the fever that had scared her so much she drove to the emergency room barefoot in the dead of winter. She remembered the science fair project he had cried over when his volcano wouldn't erupt. She recalled his first true heartbreak and the sound of his laughter when he found out he had been accepted into college. Each of these moments she had believed was theirs together. She had constructed her whole life around this boy. Her identity had been shaped entirely by being his mother. Now she was forced to confront a reality she felt no woman should ever have to. The thought occurred to her that perhaps he had never truly seen her that way. He loved what she gave him, but perhaps not who she was, not really. If he had, he never would have let her be put in that kitchen. He never would have remained silent. He never would have let them erase her. She placed the letter on the bed and smoothed it out with her hand. The feeling of betrayal was gone. It had been replaced by a sense of liberation. For 62 years she had lived a life defined by her service to others. As a wife, a mother, a provider, a ghost. But now, with that truth staring back at her in ink faded by time, she saw something new. She had an inner strength she hadn't even realized she possessed because she had completely loved someone who had never belonged to her, and she had never let that fact stop her. She chose to stay when others had fled. She had created a family even when it wasn't connected by blood. And she could choose again. Could all begin right now. She left the letter lying open on the kitchen table. She didn't conceal it. She didn't lock it away. She simply left it there, visible and plain, like a truth she no longer needed to hide from herself. She moved through the house as if she were seeing it for the very first time. The walls were a simple beige, the photographs of Adam's high school graduation were faded, and there was a dent in the door frame from when he had tried to ride his bike inside. She used to smile at that dent. Now she simply stared at it. That house was a monument to sacrifice. It was a place that held all the ways she had erased herself to keep him complete. The faded chair where she had nursed him, the sewing kit she had used to hem his pants, and the pantry that was still filled with his preferred cereal, Honey Bunches of Oats. Even though she had stopped liking it years ago, the realization suddenly struck her. She didn't even know what her own favorite cereal was. She couldn't remember the last book she had read that wasn't a parenting guide or something required for work at the hospital. She couldn't recall the last time she had spent money on something just for herself. She had spent so long being his mother that she had forgotten how to be a woman, a person. With a glass of water in hand, she settled onto the couch. The quiet of the house no longer felt like a void. It felt like a space of truth. Her phone buzzed on the nearby table. It was Adam again. This time the message was lengthy and the tone was different. I don't know what happened. I've been thinking about everything. Sophia said she didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. The familiar ache started to return. It wasn't about his perception, his comfort, his need to avoid blame. She hadn't felt excluded. He had actively excluded her, leaving her behind. Ignoring the message, she picked up the remote and turned on the television. The gentle hum of a cooking show filled the room, providing a steady calm. Her gaze drifted to the letter once more. He wasn't truly hers, not by biology and not legally, yet she had been his mother until he made it clear she was no longer part of the family he was creating. The pain inside her was no longer for him. It was for the woman she had given up to raise a boy who had never once asked, "Are you okay, Mom?" She thought of all the years, all the birthdays she had made special, and all the Christmas mornings she had stayed up past midnight wrapping simple gifts with perfect bows. She had been his background music, his reliable safety net, and his silent presence. But not anymore. That evening she took every framed photograph of them off the walls. It wasn't an act of anger or spite. It was simply time to stop living in a monument to a version of motherhood that required her to disappear. She carefully boxed them up, wrapping the glass in old towels. On the box she wrote the word, memories, instead of obligations. For dinner she cooked a meal just for herself. A recipe she had seen on a travel show. Lemon butter pasta with roasted cherry tomatoes and garlic. There were no chicken nuggets, no side of macaroni and cheese, just exactly what she wanted. As she ate, she lit a candle and played some soft jazz. The table was set for one. It was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was the sound of her reclaiming a part of herself she hadn't realized she had lost. The invitation list began with silence. There were no glitter pens or gold foil, just a lined yellow notepad and the sound of her pen scratching across the page. She wrote names one by one. Not people she felt obligated to invite, but people she genuinely wanted to see. There was Olivia, her old friend from the emergency room who used to sneak coffee into her locker during double shifts. She also included Mr. Harrison, her next-door neighbor who always cleared the snow from her driveway before she could get to it. Jasmine from the bookstore she visited every Sunday, who always listened attentively when she asked about her week, was also on the list. Finally, she wrote down Nurse Sharon, who once stayed late on her own birthday to help her cover a shift. Not a single person on that list shared her blood, but every one of them had made her feel seen in a way her own son never had. And that was the new guiding principle. Inviting people who saw her for who she was. It wasn't a wedding or a holiday, just a dinner at her house with her food at her table. There would be no folding chairs or back kitchens for her. She spent the next few days preparing for the dinner. Not because she needed to impress anyone but because she wanted to. For the first time in many years she wasn't preparing something for someone else's life. This wasn't about Adam. It wasn't about seeking redemption. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about creating a space for her own happiness. She went to the market and chose the ingredients herself. Fresh basil, garlic, and heirloom tomatoes. There was not a single frozen appetizer tray to be found. She even bought a new tablecloth, a blue one with sunflowers. It reminded her of something she would have loved when she was 20, before all the shoulds began to stack up like bricks around her life. On the morning of the dinner she woke up early and played music while she cooked. Van Morrison, Stevie Nicks, and Norah Jones. Her house smelled of garlic, olive oil, and lemon zest. It smelled like warmth, like effort, like a real home. The first guest arrived just before 6. It was Claire with a bottle of red wine and a wide smile. "You look amazing, Ellie," she said. And she did. Her hair was soft, gray at the temples but loose and confident. She wore a linen blouse that felt cool against her skin. There were no restrictive undergarments, no tear-prone mascara. Just her as she was. The others trickled in after that. 6 guests in total. Laughter filled the doorway. Hugs lasted a little longer than necessary. Wine was poured without anyone having to ask. They ate at the table she had once used for folding laundry and helping Adam with his math homework. Now it was filled with plates being passed around, the clinking of forks and napkins dabbing mouths between bursts of laughter. He laughed too. Real hearty laugh. Someone brought up a story about a bad first date. Another person confessed to stealing a pen from the bank every week out of spite. And somewhere between dessert and second helpings, it dawned on her. This was family. Not assigned by blood, but intentionally and authentically chosen. She didn't feel forgotten. She didn't feel managed. She didn't feel diminished. She felt truly present. Towards the end of the evening, as they sat beneath the string lights she had hung on the back porch, Olivia lifted her glass. "To Eleanor," Olivia began, lifting her glass, "for being the kind of woman who reminds us that it's never too late to take your seat at the head of your own table." Everyone's glasses clinked in agreement. Eleanor laughed softly, and when she raised her own glass she meant every word as she toasted, to finally being seen. The knock on her front door came just after noon. It wasn't a loud or hurried knock, but a steady one, as if the person knew she was home and wasn't going to leave until she answered. She stood in the hallway barefoot, watching his shape through the frosted glass. It was Adam. A week had passed since the wedding. 7 days of silence from her, and 7 days of something unraveling for him. She opened the door slowly. He looked the same and yet he didn't. His suit was gone, as was his former glow. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and there were dark circles under his eyes. His mouth tightened when he saw her, as if he had prepared 10 different ways to start the conversation and had forgotten all of them at once. "Hi, Mom," he said. She didn't say the words back. She stepped to the side, allowing him to enter. He hesitated for a moment, then walked past her. The house was spotless and quiet. Sunlight streamed across the living room floor. He noticed the empty spaces on the mantel. All the photos of him were gone. "Where are the pictures?" he asked. She ignored the question. "Sit down," she said, her voice calm and flat. He obeyed, sinking into the armchair across from her. For a long while neither of them spoke. Finally he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't come here to fight." She nodded. "Good," she replied. He shook his head. "I don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, and the next you're canceling things, posting checks on Facebook." The words stung her. He didn't ask how she felt. He didn't say he was sorry. He wanted an explanation. She stood up, walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a box. She set it gently on the coffee table between them. "What's this?" he asked. "Receipts," she said. "Every single one of them from the past 12 months. Venue deposits, dress fittings, caterer down payments. I even covered the extra dance floor you wanted. Do you remember that?" His eyes scanned the papers, but he didn't touch them. Next she took out the letter. His father's handwriting was unmistakable. She remained silent as he read, watching his face. At first there was confusion, then recognition, followed by a slow, creeping look of disbelief. He looked up at her, his voice cracking. "You knew?" he asked. "I do now," she said. He swallowed hard. "So you're angry because I'm not." "I'm not angry because you're not my biological son," she said, cutting him off. "I'm angry because I raised you, Adam. I gave you everything I had. And when the time came for you to honor me, to stand up and say, 'This woman made me,' you sat down." He looked down, saying nothing. "You let them push me into the kitchen," she continued, her voice not shaking. "You watched them humiliate me and you said nothing. That's what broke me. Not your DNA. Not the money." He finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think it would matter," Sophia said. "She said it would be better for the pictures, for the look. I didn't think you'd be hurt." Eleanor let out a cold, brief laugh. "You didn't think, exactly." She stood, walked over to the mantel and held up one of the empty frames. "This used to hold a photo of your kindergarten graduation. You had a missing tooth and marker on your shirt. You ran off the stage straight into my arms." She placed the frame face down. "I'm done holding on to versions of you that no longer exist." He flinched as if she had struck him. "Mom, no," he began. "I'm not your backdrop anymore," she said firmly. "I'm not your bank. I'm not your afterthought." He looked at the floor, his jaw clenched, and nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Too little. Too late." She picked up the box, closed the lid, and handed it to him. "These are yours now. Take them. Every receipt, every record, every reminder of what you chose to overlook." He hesitated, then took the box. She walked him to the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back at her as if searching for a weakness, a softness, a sign that the door might open for him again someday, but it wouldn't. "You always said I was your whole world," he said quietly. "You were," she replied. Then Eleanor closed the door. The house was filled with the kind of authentic laughter that warms your chest, making your eyes crinkle without you even noticing. The scent of garlic and rosemary danced in the air. The table was set with care, adorned with a blue and sunflower yellow cloth, mismatched plates and cloth napkins folded into small fans. In the center she had placed a candle, not to impress anyone, but because she simply enjoyed the way the flame made the silverware gleam. Her guests were gathered in the living room, sipping wine and sharing stories. Mr. Harrison was in the corner, telling a hilarious tale about accidentally locking himself out of his house in his underwear. Olivia had tears in her eyes from laughing so hard. And Eleanor? She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a glass of wine and smiling, no longer waiting to be summoned, no longer hiding, no longer forgotten. She was the hostess. She was present. She was seen. She plated the final dish, roasted vegetables with thyme and sea salt, and brought it out. As she placed it on the table, someone applauded. "Chef Eleanor strikes again," Olivia said with a wide grin. They all sat down, passing bowls and pouring more wine. Somewhere between the second helping and the last bite of cornbread, Olivia raised her glass again. "I think we should toast," she said. "To what?" Jasmine asked. Olivia turned to Eleanor. "To choosing yourself," she said, "and to knowing when to stop giving to people who only know how to take." Everyone raised their glasses. And for the first time, Eleanor fully raised hers too. She stood up. Her hands were steady and her voice did not tremble. She looked at every face around the table, people who were not bound to her by obligation or blood, but by choice, by love, and by respect. "To the mothers who stayed quiet for too long," she said. "To the women who gave everything and were told it still wasn't enough. To the ones who were asked to sit in the kitchen after building the house." She continued, "This is for us. May we never sit down again unless it's at the head of our own table." Glasses clinked, someone cheered, and Eleanor sat down. She wasn't in the back or out of sight or in exile. She was in her chair, in her place. Adam never called again. Eleanor didn't need him to. The people who mattered were already there. The next morning she woke up to the sound of bird song and light streaming through her window. There were no regrets and no tightness in her chest, just a profound sense of peace. She made coffee and sat on the porch, her robe fluttering gently in the breeze. She looked out at her garden, where the roses were blooming wild and bright. She was no longer someone's backdrop. She was the main character in her own life, and finally that was enough.